Hello friends, welcome to Online Web Tutor. I am Sanjay. In this video, we'll discuss about how to work with database tables inside a custom helper file. Back to editor. Inside the last video, we had discussed about the basic concept of creating helpers inside a CodeIgniter for application inside last video. Now this is the extended version of that part, and here we'll discuss how to work with database and its table inside a custom helper file and within its functions. So let's summarize one more time what is a helper function. So helper functions are those functions inside any application which actually created to complete a specific task. So here in this video we'll create some functions and see how they complete a specific functionality as per user's need. So whenever we create any custom helper file, it will be stored inside app and helpers folder. And while creating any custom helper, we need to follow a naming convention. So as per the naming convention, if we are creating any custom helper inside application, the name will be something called custom_helper.php. So from this file name, this is only the helper name what we are creating called custom, and automatically it means we need to add _helper as a suffix with the file name. So this is the naming standard that we need to follow while creating any helper file for this application. So let's create a helper file for this. Inside helpers folder, I'll creating, let's say, site_helper.php. Now inside this PHP file, we need to define some functions. So here, and what we want, let's say that we will create a function. By the help of that, we will return all the data what we have inside our database table. If I back to browser, go inside our phpMyAdmin. So inside this database, here we have our students table. Inside this students table, we can see we have a huge number of data. So we want to create a function inside a helper file. By the help of that, we will return all the data what we have inside this students table. Back to editor. Let's say if function exists, and here let's say get student data. So while creating this function, first we are checking that this function will not exist inside this file. So here exclamation sign. So if this function does not exist, then we can define this function here. So get student data. Now inside this function, we need to load our database first. So how to load that? So here let's say builder, or we can say db. It's simply a variable. And here let's say config database, and from that we'll use connect method. So automatically now this object is containing all about a database object. So by the help of this builder instance, now we can perform all the database operations with any specific table. So let's say that we want to actually return all the data what we'll have inside this students table. So I will copy the table name students. Back to editor, let's say builder, and we will use table method, and here's the table name called students, and I will use find all method, or instead of using find, I will use get, and let's say get result array. It is going to return all the data in an array format. So here let's say students equals to, this is the line of code, and as simple as that, let's say print r. If I print all those values, let's say echo pre tag to format our output. Let's go inside any of the controllers. Let's go inside siteController.php, and one more thing, if this is the function, if this is the helper, if we want to use globally inside any of the controller file, the best option is to load this helper file by using base controller, because base controller is the parent controller of every controllers what we'll have inside this application. If I go inside this home.php, we can see extends base controller, which is a parent controller. Let's go inside siteController.php. We can see extends base controller. So it means if we want to use this site helper and its function globally inside any of the controllers files, so to load that first we need to go inside base controller. Inside this class file we need to first find all about this helpers array and pass all about our helper file name here. So for example, in this case we have site_helper.php. So what I will do, I will pass the name of that file called site inside this helpers array. Now we are allowed to use this site helper inside any of the controller files. But let's say that I don't want to use inside any of the controller files. I want to use only for the siteController.php. So I have to load this siteHelper.php specifically for the site controller. So what I will do, I will go inside the site controller class, go inside its construct method, and here I will use a helper function, and inside this helper function I need to define an array, and here I need to pass our helper file name. So once we add this line of code called helper site, it means that we are allowed to use this helper file and its function inside only for siteController.php. So let's remove this custom here. So finally, now we have loaded this helper file inside this site controller. So let's say that our first point was that we want to read all the data what we have inside our students table. So I need to call only the function what we have created called getStudentData. So I will copy and put it here because this function is printing all the values. So here, if I save all these changes, let's define a route of the site controller and index method. So I will go inside this config folder. Let's open routes.php. So inside this routes.php, let's say that routes get method. It says students, and this route will call site controller, and from this controller we'll call index method. Let's start development server. Already started. Go to browser, its landing page, and if I will type call students, press enter. Now we can see that we have all those data what we have inside our database table. So successfully, by the help of this getStudentData code, now we have loaded all the data what we have inside our students table. One more thing we want to do before closing this video is that the same method we can use to read a single specific student data. So what we have to do, if you're not passing any value inside this function, it will return all the data, but whenever if we pass any student ID while calling this function, it will return that ID value. So what we have to do here, let's say that is student ID and equals to empty, means this is the default value. So here let's say if not empty, if student ID is not equals to empty, it means we have some data. Otherwise we need to go inside this else block, put it here. So by the help of this else block we are reading all the data, but in this case if block, let's say student equals to builder table method, and inside this we need to pass the table name. We will use where method, and here let's id equals to student id. We'll use get method, and here let's say get row array. So if we have the student id value, so while getting that value, this if block gets executed and it will return a single student data. So here, if I copy these two lines of code, paste it here, now all we have done. If I go inside the site controller, and here, if we call this, means we are not passing any value here, it will return all the data, but let's say that I am interested to see the details of only this 8th number ID. Go here, I will pass the 8th number ID, save this change, go and reload. Now we can see that we are getting a single student data. So this is all about creating a helper function, and inside that helper function we have loaded our database and connected with the students table and performed a database operation. And here, instead of returning data, if I let's say return student, instead of printing, I'm just going to return the data here, students. Save this change, go inside site controller, and here let's say students equals to, if we want to get all the data, and here let's say count students greater than 0, it means we have some data. For each loop, let's say students as student, and here let's say echo not students, student, it means single variable, single student data. And if we want to get the name value, let's go here. If we want to get the name value and email value, so here it's an array, so name comma, it's a student and email value. So if I save this change, let's go here, reload this, and here we can see that this is the name, email, name and email. So this is all about the data that by using this, we are getting all the students what we have inside our table. So successfully, by the help of last video, means the basic concept of helper, and this video all about the extended version where we had used all about the database concept with custom helper. So on the combination of these two videos, now we have the complete confidence over creating custom helpers and working with those files inside a CodeIgniter for helper. So for this video session guys, thank you for watching and have a great day.